Hi, I'm Rashonda. I'm the creator of ArtByRow.com, where I help hobby artists grow by teaching them how to focus on the process rather than the outcome. I specialize in developing creativity, creating more art in less time, and using graffiti art to generate ideas instead of always wondering what you should be working on. If this sounds like something you'd be interested in, subscribe so you get notified whenever new videos get uploaded. Now let's head on over to the art studio and do some drawings. We're going to work on today's tutorial together. Let's head on over. Okay, so in this video we are going to be drawing a jack-o'-lantern, and like usual I want to start out with some simple shapes just to get everything positioned correctly, get the size down, and most importantly to get over that blank page staring at you and start getting some lines down. Sometimes just staring at that blank piece of paper, blank sketchbook page, whatever you're working on, it can be a little bit intimidating. It seems kind of silly, but oftentimes it's just really hard to get started. So I like starting with some simple shapes just to get things laid out, start getting an idea down on paper. Okay, so with your jack-o'-lanterns, they can come in all shapes and sizes. It's up to you how you want to do them. I'm going to do just a typical kind of a rounded pumpkin, nothing fancy. But what I like to do is start with your shape. So we're going to just do a circle today. Here's where the stem's going to go. And then you can add in some contour lines. That's going to be where the ribs are of the pumpkin. And you want to draw real light so that you can go back over top of everything and add in all your details and whatnot. So we got our basic shape down, we got our circle. I added some contour lines in for the ribs, and we'll define that a little bit more later. And then you can start adding in the face of your jack-o'-lantern. And of course, if you wanted to just draw a pumpkin, then you could just continue on with just the regular pumpkin without putting the face on it. So like with everything, there's a ton of different ways that you can do your jack-o'-lantern face. You can do them scary, you can do them cute, all different types of ways that you can do it. One thing to keep in mind is that if you want your jack-o'-lantern to look more on the cute side, then when you make your components of the face, it would be better to round off your edges. So if you have these pointed shapes, they're going to look more scary or intimidating than if you had rounded off shapes. So if you want your jack-o'-lantern to be more on the cute side, then round off these edges, maybe just make everything round. But you can experiment. I'm doing mine on an artist trading card, which are 2.5 inches by 3.5 inches, so I'm working pretty small. I like doing my drawings on artist trading cards because it saves me a lot of time. I can trade them if I want to. I can put them into a portfolio. I have a binder that I put my drawings in, and they usually live in there for a little bit until I decide if I'm ready to get rid of them and trade them with another artist for their artwork. And of course, the trading part of it is completely optional. But I discovered years ago that just by doing my drawings on the artist trading cards, it's allowed me to really grow and practice a lot more and try some new things. So I've really enjoyed doing my work on the artist trading cards. I don't always trade my drawings, but I do like working on my drawings using the artist trading cards. I can get a lot more done in less time, and it has opened me up to experiment a lot more than what I was doing previously. Okay, so we're going to keep working on this. So I have everything kind of laid out. Now I want to go in and define these ribs a little bit more, because what you want is where the ribs are at, your pumpkins, they'll curve down there. So for the shape of the pumpkin, and I think I want to make this a little bit bigger so the bottom isn't as squished. Give that a little bit more room down there. So now where these ribs are at, and I'm going to darken these up a little bit so you can see what I'm talking about. You want to connect them with some curved lines at the bottom to give the pumpkin shape a little more definition. It'll help create a little nicer detail. So you can add more definition to the shape of the pumpkin or less, depending on the look that you're going for. So if you want it to be more realistic, you might want to define those ribs a little bit more. But if you want to have it not as defined, that's going to be okay too. It's going to change the overall look and feel of your pumpkin a little bit. But as an artist, those are the decisions that are up to you, and there's really no right or wrong way to do it. It just depends on kind of that feel that you want to go for. Do you want it to be more implied, or do you want it to be more defined? And then also with your cutouts for your face, do you want those to look more three-dimensional, or do you want them to just be flat and just be cut out? So I would say if you're going to fill them in just black, just so they look cut out, sometimes it looks better to leave out the 3D effect of it and just fill it in black, solid black. But oftentimes if I'm adding light in there, like if I'm going to fill that in with maybe like a yellow or an orange, sometimes I'll put more of a 3D edge to it so you can see the depth of the pumpkin where it's cut out. But also these lines going through, you can decide how much definition you want to those. So you can add those in lighter or darker, thinner, thicker. There's just a ton of different options. I'm just showing you one way to do this. But really what you want to do is experiment, try different things, play around with it. I'm not showing you the way that I think is the right way or the best way. It's just one way to do it. And then from there, my hope is that you'll play around, experiment, try some different things out, get your own style going. By practicing and doing some repetition on your drawings, that's when your style is going to come out and you're going to develop that on your own. So there's our pumpkin. We'll add a little background to it. Put some ground down here so it's not floating. So that's pretty much it for the sketch part of it. So the next thing is going to be to add an outline and some color. So for the outline, I like using these Sharpie pens. And you can use anything, whatever you're comfortable with. This is just what I prefer to use. And I also will be using markers today. But this can be done, it doesn't have to be marker, it could be color pencil or paint or whatever else you want to do. I just prefer these Sharpie pens. They're different than the markers. The pens don't bleed as much as the markers do. So sometimes if you use those thin, even if you use like the thin Sharpie marker, they tend to bleed into the paper and it makes kind of a like a fuzzy edge to everything. And that bothers me. I don't really like how that looks, especially on these smaller, on the artist trading card size drawings. I think it's more noticeable. So all I'm doing is just going right over top of the lines that I want to keep and cleaning it up a little bit. We'll go back in with an eraser and get rid of all the extra pencil lines. And like I said, as far as these ribs go, you might want yours less noticeable. You might want them more noticeable. You could put kind of broken lines in here to indicate where they are. Or you could make them solid lines. And all of those things are going to change the overall look of your jack-o'-lantern. I usually, on mine, I'll make this line all connected. And then for the eyes, so for the eyes, like I mentioned earlier, you can either fill these in just solid black and just have them look like they're cut out. Or you can do so look like they're lit, like there's a candle in there, and do like a yellow or an orange. And I've done them both ways. I'll have to check and see if I still have some of these. Typically what I'll do is a series of several drawings, so I like to do 7 is usually what I'll do. So at one time I did 7 or 8 different jack-o'-lantern drawings. And I'll have to check and see if I still have some of those in my little portfolio. I'll show those at the end if I can find any of them. But I like to do them all different ways. I do some of them where I'll make it where you can see the cutout parts. Some of them will be yellow, some will be circular shapes, some will be just kind of crazy shapes. Just trying different things. And that's where it really starts getting fun, is when you start playing around and experimenting, trying different things out. And we can go over this, add the ground in the back so it's not a floating jack-o'-lantern. So that's it for the outline. And then I just take this eraser, and I also have this pink pearl eraser. Those work okay too. I've been using this one, and I don't even know where I got this from. I think it came with one of those cheap hobby drawing kits, but it works pretty well. It doesn't leave any smudges behind, but it does kind of make a mess. So we just go right over top of everything, get that all cleaned up, and now it is ready for some color. So when I pick out my markers, I want them to be able to blend together. So what I'll do is take these scrap papers that are left over. These cards are cut from cardstock, and when you cut them, if you do it the right way, you can get 10 blank cards out of one piece of cardstock. And then you have these little scraps left over, and they work really well for trying out the colors. I like my colors to be able to blend together, so they need to be fairly close to being the same. You don't want too much difference in the values of them. So I like to test them out ahead of time. And then, of course, you kind of get used to which markers go together and those sorts of things. So I like using 2 or 3 different markers for each section. So if I'm doing green, I like to have 2 or 3 different greens. A lot of times with the artist trading cards, it's a little bit harder to get 3 different markers in. But like for the orange part, you could use a yellow for your lightest value, and then a couple different orange. But by using the lights and darks, it adds a little bit more definition and depth to your drawings. And you also want to make sure that your markers are still wet when you're blending them. Once they dry, they're not going to blend as well. So what I'll typically do is just work one section at a time. On these cards, they're pretty small. You could do several sections would be fine, but and I just kind of work back and forth. One of the questions I get asked quite a bit is if it'll ruin the markers, and it does not. When you go back and forth with your lights and dark markers, you do not have to worry about the darker color transferring onto the lighter color. That is not an issue. That doesn't happen. At least I've never experienced that happening. And then the type of markers you use, I mean, that's really just a personal preference. I have, as you can see, I have a bunch of different markers. I started experimenting with using markers in my artwork maybe about probably 15 years ago now. And I started playing with the markers when I was doing some graffiti drawings. Back when I was teaching in the classroom, I was a classroom art teacher at one time. And I started playing around with some markers, doing some different graffiti art and doing those types of drawings. And I've experimented with a lot of different markers and different brands. And the ones that I have now are just things that I've kind of accumulated over the years. So as you can see, I have, this one's a Prismacolor. I have some Sharpie, which are actually my least favorite. These Bic markers. You can mix and match. They're all alcohol-based markers. So as long as they're the alcohol-based markers, then they're going to blend together because the alcohol is what gets into the paper and allows them to blend. And then these are touch markers. I like these a lot better. I like this style a lot better. It's a dual tip. The Prismacolor is also a dual tip, but I don't like them as well. But those are also, I think they redesign the Prismacolors. I don't think they make that style anymore, but I didn't care too much for the dual tip on the Prismacolor, but I think it's good. A lot of it's going to depend on your budget. The Copic are very popular, but I do not use them. I don't need that high of a quality of marker. You do need to be careful with the real cheap markers that you can get at, like, I know Hobby Lobby has some different ones, and you can get like a whole set of them for less than $20, I think, for a bunch of markers. Those are not the best quality, and what I noticed happens with those is that they tend to oversaturate the paper if you're not careful, and it makes a mess and everything gets real fuzzy looking. So I'm just cleaning up these lines a little bit. All right, so for the background, for the sky part of it, I like doing these galaxy drawings. And I have my markers set aside. I have a little cubby box for my markers to get stored in. And I have these markers set aside for these galaxies that I like to do. And you can do all different colors. You could do blues and greens, like kind of like the Northern Light type colors look nice. But I have these set aside in their own little section in the storage bins. And you just do the same thing with these. You go from light to dark, transitioning the colors, and then going back over it with the lighter color to blend it. And you can go over these as much as you want to, if you want them to be more blended or less blended. And again, this all goes back to the look and the style that you're going for. Everybody has different opinions on what looks good, what doesn't look good. I like doing my outlines in black, and that may not be your preference. And that's going to help develop your own style, or all these different things that you like and don't like about your artwork and what you think looks good. And that's going to come out by trying different things and experimenting and just getting an idea of what your preferences are and what things you think look better or worse. If you don't like the way the dark outline looks on the artwork, if that's not something that appeals to you, then you should avoid that, and that just won't be part of your style. But that's going to be something that you'll determine with practice and repetition. So if you feel like you don't have your own style yet, it just means you need to practice more. So we're just going to fill all this white space in. And again, with the colors that I'm using here, you might prefer something that's darker. You could prefer something that's lighter. Again, this is all just personal preference. What you like, what you don't like. And just keep working on it, figure it out. The more you do, the more your style is going to start coming out. Maybe you want it more blended, maybe you want it less blended. It's all going to change just kind of the overall look and feel of your artwork. Touch up a couple of these spots. And you want to make sure when you're using markers they'll tend to bleed through. Even on the cardstock, they'll bleed through a little bit. So you want to make sure you put something in between. Like if you're using a sketchbook, you'll want to make sure you're putting something underneath, a scrap piece of paper underneath or something, because if not, it will tend to bleed through and it'll get on your next page of your sketchbook or whatever you're using, and nobody wants that. So now the last thing I like to do is to use a jelly roll pen, and you can go right over top of the markers with this, and I like to add just a few white highlights on here just to break up the solid color a little bit. And when I do this, I'm not worrying about where my light source is or anything like that. I'm just trying to break up the large chunks of color. You could be more specific with where your highlights are and where the direction, I should say, of your light source. But I'm not that worried about it. I'm just trying to not have large chunks of solid color in there. I want to break it up with the highlights a little bit. I'm just throwing in some stars for the galaxy, trying to vary the size a little bit. And that's pretty much it. There's our finished jack-o'-lantern. Hopefully you enjoyed this and you feel inspired to make your own. And I will see you soon in the next video. Happy creating! Before I go, I want to show you some examples real quick. These are some cards that I have in my portfolio that I talked about earlier. So this is the one from the video. Here's another one with a little bit different shape to it. Instead of your typical round shape, added some leaves up at the top. Here's one that's got a little bit of that cuter type of a feel to it. Elongated shape again. But what I was talking about earlier in the video about making the eyes round. So by making your edges rounder and more smooth, it'll give it a little bit of a cuter look. Here's another one with a little bit of a different type of background. Here's one on a toned paper card. Again, with the rounded eyes. That one's a little more on the goofy side. This one was fun. This was done using bleeding tissue paper for the background, using some warm color combinations, and then it was cut out into an artist trading card, and then the jack-o'-lantern face on the front of it. This one was turned into a scarecrow, which these are really fun to do. And then here's a couple that are just pumpkins. And I wanted to show you these because I wanted to show how doing the different thicknesses and line weights can change the overall look a little bit. You can do some different things with your outlines. Here we did the squiggly white around the outside edge. This one has a double outline. That one has a single outline. So there's just so much variation you can add with your artwork. And I really just wanted to illustrate how you can take a drawing that's pretty simple and do so many different things with it and create so many different types of artwork. So that's all I wanted to show you in this little section. I hope you feel inspired to draw your own. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you can see all the future videos, and it also helps the channel grow so we can reach more people. Happy creating and have a wonderful day. So how did you do? Hopefully you followed along with the tutorial and worked on your own artwork. If you enjoyed this and you want to get notified of other lessons that are coming up in the future, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and you'll get notified whenever something new gets uploaded. Have a good day and happy creating!